beautiful legends, and welcome to Blunt Force Healing Podcast episode 260, in which I'll tell you about what happened yesterday, the sickness, and other things that piled up on a stormy day. So it was more stormy than usual, and also about this bank holiday and my thoughts about the touristic season that started now in Ireland. So let's start from the beginning. One mistake that I did yesterday, and I left it as a blooper type of thing. I said that yesterday was episode 260, which wasn't true, but in my defense, I must say that I wasn't there with my head as I was saying it. I didn't check it, and for some reason I thought that it's already day 260. I was a bit lightheaded even because yesterday, most of you know that listen to me or read my blog that it was a what I call stormy days. I call stormy days all those days when we leave Donegal town for long, usually on the long trips, like we go to Dublin, for example, for the whole day. And this exactly happened yesterday. We had an appointment planned that was planned long time ago, and we had to go there. The weather was good, obviously, because we have that I would say streak of good weather, sunny spells for a couple of days now, and the temperatures are high. So I wasn't worried about the drive itself, but I knew that it's you know usual challenge. It's about 3.5 hours one way and back, so it's roughly between 6.5 to 7 hours of driving. Then obviously you need to add up the traffic in town if you move around, and there is very little time or space to facilitate any schedule that you usually can when you're at home. And this applies to blog writing and podcast recording as well. I am in a flexible situation where I don't have a specific setup to record the podcast, and I can record it pretty much anywhere uh, because of the character of those updates, which are you know journal updates, as genuine as possible and as raw as possible wherever I am. Obviously, I try to limit the noise to make sure that you can hear me clear and sound. So, and talking about the noise, let me just close the window. Because for some reason, when I started recording, suddenly cars started driving in front of my house, one after another. Kind of weird coincidence, right? So, when we were preparing for the drive yesterday, I knew it would be tiring, right? But there were at least two situations that added up to that day that I can consider it the worst stormy day so far that I've had. So, as we started driving towards Dublin, I think it was probably about maybe 20 miles in or about 30-35 kilometers in. I started feeling weird on my stomach. And I recognize that feeling because, sometimes it feels a little bit like a pain, but it goes away after some time. You might feel a little bit nausea and like you might want to, vomit at some stage, but in general, I don't have problems with that. It's a little upset and it might just go away. But in this case, it started growing and growing, that feeling, and I started feeling a bit weaker, and my head started to be a bit on the warm side. I don't know. I didn't have thermometer, so I can't say if I had a fever, but I felt like I might have had a little bit higher temperature than usual, and slight headache also set in. And in general, my digestive system in general started kind of feeling weird. So I had to stop at some gas station and use the toilet there, and it only went worse and worse as we progressed, to the point that I needed to stop two more times before we reached Dublin. And to that extent that we were considering my wife would take over driving, even though she's not comfortable with those long haul drives. But obviously, for safety reason, if there was no other choice, that was an option. But she didn't have proper shoes. She had like a ladies' shoes just for that occasion of that appointment that she was heading to, and we're not expecting her to drive at all. But hey, it's a lesson learned. We learned a valuable lesson then, that anytime we go out, she should take comfortable shoes anyway. They don't need to be used, but if they are in the trunk, that's always an advantage and a backup options for the driving. Obviously, you can drive with bare feet in your socks, or even completely bare feet, but it's not as safe as in a comfortable normal shoes. So, and definitely not for drivers that don't feel confident behind the steering wheel, which my wife is, especially on the unknown roads for her that she never drove. So it was a terrible feeling that was setting down. Well, setting, I would say setting up, but I was feeling down and down, and to the point that it was for a moment unsafe. And when I felt a bit like, when you're tired and you might fall asleep behind the wheel for a split second, and that was very dangerous. And the sun didn't help, because while we had obviously air conditioning on in the car, it's still, when it keeps heating you through that windshield. Well, you know how it is probably if you drive, or even if you're a passenger in a car or in a bus or anywhere else where the sun is, you're exposed to the sun through the glass, regardless how well climatized the vehicle is. It is not a pleasant experience, especially if you're feeling sick. So at some stage, I think I even in a slow traffic, just at the lights, I think in Virginia or somewhere, I think I had a moment where I actually rubbed the curb with the left front wheel. So that woke me up a little bit and made me alert much more. My wife was slightly terrified at this stage, but I said to her to not panic, because I can handle it. And I wasn't just stubborn. I just knew that while my attention was still there and focus was still there, it's just my body tried to trick me into some nap or whatever. And I kept hydrating myself, so that helped, and we got to Dublin safe. But as we were approaching the Dublin city, it turned out that all roads are closed around the city center, about probably 1.5 kilometers, so about a mile from the spot where we were heading to. All the roads were closed, and even further, depending on which side of Dublin you were coming in, because there was they call it mini marathon, but it was basically a 10 kilometers run, just women, and that was probably 20,000 women that this marathon was, well, that 10K run was organized for. So Dublin City Council, obviously, Gardaí, which is Irish police, were standing there and making sure that nobody crosses those barriers. So we started trying to get, as close to that area that my wife was set for an appointment. And it turned out that the further we went, more roads were closed. So we actually had to decide. And I stopped at some light and said to her, like, listen, just turn Google Maps. It will lead you straight to that. Because we have not much time. I think she was about 15 minutes to the appointment and about 20 minutes walk. So I said, like, listen, you might be a little bit later, but it's still better than just waiting if I can find any way to get to that spot, and I probably don't. So she left. She managed to get there, and fortunately, there was another client or person still delayed a little bit in terms of being served. So she was well on time, no problem at all. It was just that inconvenience. And me and Julian, we kind of headed away from Dublin as far as we can because we knew that she won't be ready for another 2 or 3 hours. And we went to Leafy Valley, which is kind of shopping center and a bit of area that we know well. And we could hide in the shade, park the car and charge it as well at the same time, which was another benefit. So, on top of that standard stormy days, I got that sickness, the stomach upset and lightheadedness and general kind of bad feel. And that marathon was ongoing. I think there were another 2 or 3 events around Dublin at the time as well, because that Sunday was packed with the events. So we were still lucky to get there anyway. So I took a rest. I took a nap in the car while Julian was reading a little bit of a book and then, using some tablet to watch YouTube. But we kind of secured the car, closed the car, and Julian was keeping an eye. He was a champ. He was constantly checking on me and making sure that I feel good and, just to be alert if he needs to call my wife. But fortunately, everything was good. We got back to Dublin around 7 o'clock in the evening when the roads were already opening, and we picked my wife and we got out of Dublin through tunnel and the bypass. It's more costly because you need to pay for about 2 or 3 tolls, but this way I knew that I will exit Dublin on time and just head on instead of kind of maneuvering between those roads that are still closed and those that are already open. So we didn't want that. She ate the dinner during that appointment because she knows the person that is kind of serving her and they know well each other. So that wasn't a problem. Me and Julian, we kind of survived on some food that we picked on the way, and we got back home. Fortunately, everything went safe. On the way back, I already felt better, so it wasn't that bad in the end. But yeah, thing to keep in mind. I carry those vomit bags in the car since Julian had a situation in the past, and we need to remember about those potential, comfy boots or shoes to make sure that my wife can drive. Not sure what I'll do if something like that hits me when I'm alone, because that's more difficult, but hey, these things happen. So yeah, that was yesterday. Today I still feel a little bit heavy on the stomach, but I was already able to eat different things. I try to avoid the heavy foods. But we went to Rosnola, the beach. It was packed. And despite the fact that the roads were clear and the weather kind of settled a little bit, so it's a bit more cloudy, less sun, it's still warm. We were expecting a lot of people because it's a bank holiday in Ireland. So Monday is free for most of the people from work. So a lot of people kind of planned those 3 days as a kind of city break or just kind of small holiday. And yesterday everything was packed and Dublin was full, obviously. The day before, beaches were full and the sun was roasting, but today it was quite empty. And even when we got to the bakery shack to get some, tea and scones before we went onto the beach, it was so quiet. And I asked the guys, and they said that yeah, yesterday was terrible. They had like a queue out the door, uh, long queue of people for the whole day. But today it was quiet, and they were quite happy to get that uh, moment of relax from the busyness of the day. We played a little bit of football with Julian on the beach. Then we had about 5k walk with my wife and Julian, and yeah, the beach was nice. It was low tide, but the amount of cars that were there, and it's not yet season. Like we don't have yet the vacation or kind of summertime. So I'm really worried how packed this beach will be because I took a couple of pictures. I might put them in maybe tomorrow on the blog or maybe even today. It's not visible in the picture as much as it made, you know, impact on you when you were walking alongside the beach and saw so many cars, because this particular beach and a couple of other beaches in Ireland are those that you can actually drive into the beach. So it's fairly hard surface, and the sand is not soft too much that the cars can drive in, and it's kind of tradition for people to drive in. There is a secured area in the middle of the beach where people are kind of playing and bathing, and where the lifeguard is keeping an eye on. So you can't drive through that area. So you either need to enter the beach from one side or from the other, which is good because there is that safe space for people to play around. But yeah, it was really packed today, and currently my wife finished her exercise. I might consider some activity for the end of the day. I think Julian just finished playing console and is doing something downstairs. So I'll wrap up now and recover a little bit more. I expect a very busy day tomorrow at work, but yeah, the key point is I'm feeling better and I can return to daily things. I wanted to write a little bit or tell you a little bit more about other topic, but I think I will leave it for the blog and maybe talk a little bit about it in tomorrow's episode. For now, let me just wish you a great rest of the day, maybe morning, maybe evening, depending on where you are. And I hope you're safe, you take care of yourself, and thank you very much for spending time on this channel. Regardless if you're reading the blog, listening on Spotify or other podcast platform, or watching me on YouTube, I highly appreciate that. Stay tuned and see you tomorrow.